Hello and welcome to my Leaguestarter plans for Legacy of Phrecia, an Aristocrat caster using the new staff, Jiquani's Potential. Now this is going to be what I think will be able to take us all the way into doing Ubers very early on, because it's just a ridiculous amount of flat damage and can be very built around. But the goal is to eventually transform into a Valdo Void Farmer with, I believe, Hand of Wisdom in action is the approach we're going to take. But there's a lot of steps to get to that point, and it's got to start out with leveling a duelist, and let's be honest, leveling as a caster as a duelist isn't going to cut it. Yesterday, I did a run where I leveled with slams, with Sunder, classic, old reliable, and honestly, for somebody who doesn't practice slams very much, I was going faster than I normally do. Slams seem insane, just doing basically some automated war cries for seismic rallying and the intimidating cries, along with auto exert support and then over exertion support on my main weapon, and it feels very dang smooth all the way through. You can check out the run if you're curious how we did leveling, but that is the plan. I've made the POB have leveling trees for basically, we're starting out with slams using precise technique, and then we later have the potential to say, okay, let's say Jiquani's looks like it's going to be a bit expensive. We can rotate into doing a Brutus-led sprinkler setup while we're still farming to get the money for Jiquani's, which should allow us to be fairly tanky. We can go into block, and then some strength scaling should give us decent EHP pool to start out with, and that'll work for our initial farming if Jiquani's is a little bit expensive. The staff is a T3 and it's level 66, so it's a similar drop table or drop rate of something like an Ivory Tower, if that makes sense. It's a high level item, so it doesn't exist right away, but once the bulk of the players get to level 60 whatever, it starts becoming saturated on the market and should be readily available. That's essentially what we're going to try to build around, but before then, we could potentially play Brutus-led Sprinkler or just generic Fizz Slams. I have a level 67 tree for both regular slams and Brutus-led Sprinkler slams. It's not too complicated in terms of a tree. Just grab some damage in life and just chill out until you can afford to swap to Jiquani's. Now, when we're talking about this staff, you might look at this tree and say, holy Lance, what the hell am I looking at? That is the worst tree I've ever seen in my life. And I gotta be honest, normally a tree like this is horrible. But with Aristocrat, now hear me out, it's actually quite good, and I can explain why. When you're traveling around the passive tree, you're picking up a bunch of travel nodes that have attributes, which is normally just not that helpful, right? It's like 2% in here, 5 flat life here. Who freaking knows what evasion does for us in dexterity? But you get the point. It's travel nodes that don't give you a lot of power. When it comes to Aristocrat, this one node here says, if you do a bunch of travel points, I will pay you for that with damage. This character's tree currently, with some really potato gear, is around 500 of every attribute, and that means this one node is giving us 800% damage. The thought process here is, when you travel around the outside like this, whenever you're going to these starting areas where you have Witch, you have Templar, you have Marauder, you have Duelist, you have Shadow, all these starting areas come with actually a decent amount of flat attributes along with some decent stats. Every single notable has 20 stat on them, 20 int, 20 int, 10 dex, 10 int, 10 dex, 10 int, 20 dex, 20 strength, 20 strength, 20 strength, 10 int, 10 strength, 10 int, 10 strength. You get the idea. These notables, which are normally, they have some decent stats like percent fizz, like attack speed. That's the thing you normally care about more. But the thing is, you have that powerful, decent, notable stat, and then on top of that, you have these flat attributes, which are very, very good for this notable right here, and makes this traveling be somewhat worth it, where we're picking up life, and we're getting to the side of the tree where we actually want to be, which has a lot more like cast speed availability, spell AoE, the int cluster. This is stuff we want to be near, but we have to get there as duelist. How do we get there? Well, early on, this sort of travel feels very, very worth it once you have this node to consider. You need this node for it to be worth it, but that's where you level his slams and then you do a respec around level 70-ish if that's when you get the Jiquani staff. Otherwise, you have to wait a little bit later, and then the gold respec is going to be more expensive, but you get the idea. This pathway around town gives you a bunch of good, effective attributes along with useful stats you want along the way. Like, for example, attack speed, which helps your leap slam, ignore all movement speed penalties, a bunch of regen, some more attack speed, attack speed and some attributes, attack speed, cast speed, some pretty good notables here along the way. It's giving you, you're traveling while also giving you some solid stats along the way. Later on, when you level up the character more and you get availability of like things like, let's say, Unnatural Instinct, I made a tree to showcase how you would change this pathing around. Like if you can get an Unnatural Instinct plus a Light Immunity with like attributes, all of a sudden pathing through the center becomes more efficient in my opinion. But initially, this around town pathing is what we're doing to take advantage of Dreadful Attitude, as well as get ourselves to the caster part of the tree where we can get cast speed, spell crit chance, the int cluster, stuff like that that will help us with the Jiquani's staff. Now, aside from that, I'm not a big fan of making things in POB. So this character or this gear that you'll see here is just a character I set up in game. And you might be going, okay, a lot of that gear makes sense, but Lance, why the hell are you wearing a triple stat simplex? Isn't that like a mere tier level item? I can explain. Okay, so what I've gone through for this test character that I'm going to show you is, you'll notice I've rolled the amulet for specifically 39% attributes. I was trying to get it as close to 40% int as possible because our ascendancy, remember, gives us 40% int here. I have a Templar that is no ascendancy, so I'm just trying to basically give something that would give the representation of an aristocrat without having it in game. So what I did is I got 40% in from this amulet. Technically, we don't even have an amulet on right now. This amulet is just giving us enough to get 40% in, and you might be thinking, but Lance, it has 17% attribute. I accounted for that. I went and I put bad tattoos on all the extra strength and dex I got from this amulet. I counterbalanced it. Basically, originally, when I had this amulet on, I was like 600, 580, something like that, and I tattooed off a bunch of strength and dex to counterbalance the 17% attribute from this amulet. And then on top of that, you'll notice Aristocrat, again, has the 40%, or not 40%, the 8% per 5 attribute of your lowest. This character has about 500 of each stat, or 500 is the lowest, which means we have 800% damage. And to basically, to give us the representation of that percent damage, what I went through is I added on a Light of Meaning, which this right here is giving us about 66% damage. I added on a cluster with a bunch of percent damage. This is giving us about 140. That takes us to about 200. I have 2 jewels that are giving us a bunch of percent damage. This takes us to about 280-ish. I have this on with about 700 or whatever int I have. It's about 100% damage. I'm currently around 400 to 500% damage from the stuff I added on the tree to try to balance out the Dreadful Attitude. I'm still 300% damage short. This character should end up dealing like 40% to 60% more damage on League Start with the exact same gear I have here. But that's the idea of why I have this stuff on this character. This is a level 98 character with no ascendancy, and this is what was required for me to try to get close to simulating an aristocrat. So yeah, that's what that stuff is. As for the other gearing, it's just some really cheapo gear where you just buy some initial rares that have life and ES on them. Maybe you benchcraft them stats, like let's say hybrid res or hybrid attributes, something like that. I have Foulborn Lori's Lantern, which gives us lucky damage, which makes this ring pretty worth it on a budget. I have a Lahoop. This is much worse than just a decent rare, but it's just to showcase an item that has some generic stats and some generic res. Then I have a Meganords to try to pick up some of the strength if you don't have a lot of strength elsewhere on the gear. A Cyclopean will beat this, but that's just something you would get later on. A rare Stygian will also beat this, obviously. So you have to start somewhere. This is just some basic gear to just showcase the item. And the staff I had is an absolute minimum roll on percent life, 2% intelligence, which technically is a min roll 1% intelligence if you associate, the 39 roll with that and put 1% over there to represent the 40% in from Aristocrat. And then a mid roll on the flat. It's 44 out of 31 to 53, so a little bit above mid roll. But the idea was just to showcase a not great roll Jiquanis and some pretty trash gear. And this character right now, I know it's a level 98 Guardian, but what I'm actually showcasing here is essentially what is a level 72 character with, in my opinion, very, very bad gear. So anyways, we're gonna go ahead and showcase what this looks like doing a yellow map. I did a shaper with this gear last night on stream. We tried out Penance for Anticipation. Ultimately, this character will be able to use pretty much whatever spell you want. You obviously have to do specific customization based on certain circumstances. Like, for example, let's say I wanted to take this character into Sanctum. I would use Penance for Anticipation. I would click the Runesmith node, I would grab Runebinder, and I would force in, like, instead of running Eternal Blessing Grace, I would run Eternal Blessing Haste for that extra speed. I would go for a rare ring with cast speed. I would have cast speed on my amulet. I would force in certain things that help out the build a lot more. Once again, I'm going to stress this character with this amulet is just getting us to baseline of what a 72 Aristocrat would do. Essentially, I am not wearing an amulet right now. Also, the Anoint Divine Judgment was trying to contribute to making up the percent damage difference. Again, we're still like 300% damage short. So anyways, this is what a T10 map would look like on a level 70 character. Probably the one unfair thing I have for this budget level is I went ahead and I put instilling flasks or instilling orbs onto my flask, which you won't have those right away on League Start. So that was kind of my bad on putting those on there. But I also just didn't want to click flasks. I'll click flasks tomorrow when we start the character, and it'll be okay. But initially, I was thinking Wave of Conviction of Charthus. I like this skill. It's nice, like big AoE, hits decently hard. Not the best single target, not necessarily the best clear, but I feel like it's a good middle ground. And where the heck am I going? It's like I feel like the circle's supposed to go around this way. Okay, it is. I just didn't take that corner. See, I thought I was pathing the right way initially, but I guess I just wasn't. I was kind of going the wrong way. Anyways, Wave of Conviction of Charthus. You don't have to play the skill. This is just the one skill I was thinking would be fun to play because I've been wanting to play it for a bit and never got around to it. And this is what it looks like in if I was doing a yellow map. Our current defensive layers are, you know, we have some mid-tier ES gear, 2k ES with 4k hybrid petrified blood. Later on with the tree, you'll get much higher ES just with like decent rares essentially. And that'll be plenty fine. So that's kind of the idea of the initial real budget setup. I just wanted to give a skeleton. I don't like to make the endgame versions of characters before actually playing it. It ruins kind of the fun for me. So that's just what it looks like with really scuffed gear right in yellow maps. We're running evasion right now. This is 60 evade with just the Eternal Blessing Grace. Later on in the character, like for example, in the tree I showcased here, where we start pathing through the middle, one of the later things we're going to go for is Mage Bane. When you start scaling up decks, you end up getting your suppression relatively easily. We'll end up being able to suppress cap, I believe, with just these travel points and Mage Bane. And you add in Light of Meaning here, a bunch of attribute scaling there, that'll help. And then you trade the evasion scaling from your decks, but you don't actually lose it because you get the evasion scaling back over here with the mastery. We also will probably consider using Shaper's Touch later on, which will allow us to have a very high evasion number running like a hybrid chest plus Grace and Ghost Dance, which should help that hybrid playstyle. Now, I haven't decided on this late game, but I am considering potentially doing Mask of the Stitch Demon and doing like some really high regen life shenanigans. I don't know if that's going to be worth it because Ghost Dance is kind of insane and we'll already have so much ES. So I don't know if I'm actually going to commit to that, but it's something that I've been juggling around in my head as a possibility. I'll try things out, see how they do, and then I will be, of course, showcasing the daily updates of the character and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what's working. You get the idea. That's the sort of thing we're going for. So that's what these trees are. This is like the earliest I would swap to Jiquani's is like level 70-ish. When you can afford to respec to a tree like this, where you're getting a lot of these efficient attributes and you're starting to pick up some cast speed here, and around the tree. Obviously, you want to get rares with cast speed. The showcase I had here had, you know, a Lahoop, no cast speed. This isn't even an amulet. It's basically as if we were wearing no amulet here in terms of this is just balancing us to get us to Aristocrats percent int scaling. That's all it's there for. So obviously an amulet with cast speed, crit multi, stuff like that. That's the idea. This was a 5-link showcase with just some basic stuff set up. Hopefully you guys appreciate that. Real quick, I'm going to cut this in the video because I forgot to go over it, which is some of our graph choices. We're going to go for Tender Embrace. We're a low life build, which basically means this is just going to permanently be giving us endurance charges on cooldown whenever we're in zones, which is very, very convenient. So like this thing will just keep proccing. I don't know what its cooldown is, like every 4 seconds or something like that. Yeah, you'll see it procs. It's going to give us permanent endurance charges along with a little bit of extra recovery rate. And then Heart of Flame procs whenever you're missing life, which we pretty much always are. And that's just a pretty consistent like Molten Shell level thing. These are the 2 graphs I would recommend going for the character. Later on, we'll invest into like some instat graphs and stuff like that later, much later on the character. But initially, these are very, very nice defensive options to start out with. Back to the rest of the video. As for the character gear purchasing, I am working on a buy list. I have some basic strength stack gear pieces because initially, let's say Jiquani's is too expensive early on. You could just play Brutus Lead Sprinkler or play normal rare axe slams, and that works fine until you can swap. And then I'm going to be working on some weighted sums. I have not finished the list yet. I will be doing that on stream and I will update it. I will be putting the import code for the better trading in the description of the notes section, and the POB will be updated. When you're first watching the video, it won't be updated yet because I'm going to be doing the rest of this buy list on stream. But the simple idea is rare items. It's all about adjusting this weight up. The better item you want, you make the number go up. And then for rare items like energy shield pieces, you'll want to adjust your ES number along with the weighted sum, kind of tinker around with both of those numbers. That's the sort of the idea. And then the list is trying to be mostly in order from your cheap early items into your more expensive upgrades and upgrades, if that makes sense. That's like kind of like the gear priority, like how quickly you want to go to each piece. Like for example, early on, Meganords is here. Later on, I'll have Cyclopean Coil. Later on than that will be Mageblood. That's the sort of idea. Anyways, that's the buy list plan. We leveled his slams, felt really good. The goal is to swap to this item as early as possible, and my thought process is the scaling's kind of insane based on the numbers on Aristocrat, and this staff, I think we'll be able to push uber damage viability pretty early on. I could just be cooked. You know, I could be completely coping, just wrong, but I think it's going to be there. We'll see. All in all, pretty happy with my initial test and my run through the campaign. Have fun on Legacy of Phrecia on Leaguestarter, guys. I will see you guys out there. As always, thanks for watching. Take care. And peace out. Have a good one, guys.